Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining our weekly podcast. I'm Robin Lewis, founder and CEO of the Robin Report, which, by the way, I always say this is much more than a daily report. We are not a newsletter. We communicate thought leadership on various strategic topics through, yes, our reports, but also these podcasts, webinars, and live events eventually. Anyway, along with our chief strategist, Shelley Kohan, by the way, also a professor at the Fashion Institute of Technology, we welcome you to our conversation today on the topic of organized retail crime takes a bite out of profits, saying it's lightly, on the topic of, and more worrisome, is the impact on employee and shopper safety. This is really a kind of a dark topic, but boy, it's got to be confronted, right? I mean, and nobody seems to be doing. Everybody's talking about it, but we'll go through some of the solutions anyway. Shelley, we literally spent over 2 years talking about inventory from 2020 to 2022. Too much stuff, not enough, in the wrong place, and a clogged up supply chain. CEOs like Pete Nordstrom discussing SKU rationalization. And now we have another unfortunate trend that is keeping CEOs and CFOs up at night. In my first quarter earnings reports, CEOs are talking about the rise in organized retail crime. And I am hoping that we do not spend the next 2 years on this topic, because not only does it eat away at already squeezed margins, but it puts employees and customers at risk. So, the National Retail Federation, NRF, shows that retail loss is a $95 billion problem and growing. Organized retail crime is estimated to be nearly half of that amount. So, the rest of it, individual associates taking stuff home while paying for it, and random stealing of products and so forth. But half of it is organized retail crime. About 70% of retailers believe the threat of ORC had increased during the past 5 years. This, according to the 2022 National Retail Security Survey. So, Shelley, well, most of our audience understands organized retail crime. For those that need a brief introduction, can you tell us what the characteristics are of ORC?
Well, Robin, sure. I mean, organized retail crime is, well, just that. It's highly organized theft. It kind of runs like a business. And here are some of the characteristics. The first characteristic is that it's large scale theft. So I'm talking about cargo theft, like literally stealing a shipment from a truck or a ship, or grab and runs where there's massive quantities, like a whole tea stand of denim that's, taken from a storefront and put into the back of a car. And there's also targeted items that fill demand on a black market. So here are some stats from the NRF and a K2 Integrity Retail Crime Report that was actually just published in April. So estimates of losses from cargo theft alone in the United States range between 15 billion and 30 billion annually.
Wow.
And between 2019, so pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, so 2019 to 2021, incidents of cargo theft have increased 84%. This is according to CargoNet, a cargo theft prevention and recovery network that spans United States and Canada. And in 2021, Union Pacific Railroad Company reported a 160% annual increase in rail thefts.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's really bad. And one last point I do want to make specific to cargo theft is that this is an area where it has the highest level of employee collusion, meaning that because you have to have some type of insider information. So either freight container, what's in the freight containers, logistics routes, what are the security measures, procedures, and what are the schedules, there's a higher participation rate of employees in these thefts. The second characteristic of organized retail crime is that the stolen goods are resold on other e-commerce sites, flea markets, now even social media, and on the black markets, and companies do this for financial gain. So there's new legislation that's coming out there that's with this, but this reselling for financial is second characteristics of organized retail crime.
Boy, I'll tell you, it's crazy. The passing of the information, the Inform Act, which goes into effect this month on June 27th, right? Yeah, will require online marketplaces to verify the identities of high volume third-party sellers. This will hopefully at least slow down the resale of stolen goods on large e-com sites and marketplaces like eBay, Craigslist, and other large-scale marketplaces. This is crazy. The NRF has been a voice of the industry for this initiative and has worked hard to get this law passed. But, just step back and think about it. It's like we've got organized crime is a disintermediary, and they're taking stuff and building a whole new industry. Anyway, maybe we'll get to more of that later.
Yeah, but that's exactly what's happening. And actually, here's a fun fact, Robin, to lighten up our mood a little bit. About the NRF is that they actually purposely built their corporate offices in DC so that they can be close to Congress to help advocate on retail legislation issues. So, but going back to these characteristics, the last major characteristic, and probably this is the most concerning, is that organized retail crime is considered a gateway crime. What that means is that organized retail crime leads to drug, gun, persons trafficking, and supporting terrorist activities. So it's for this reason that the NRF has had the ear of Congress, which we'll talk about later, but here are some examples. So in the ORC crime report, it showed that organized retail crime actually serves as a source of income for street gangs.
Wow.
Which often compel juveniles to partake in organized retail crime as part of gang initiations. But between 2014 and 2016, there was a senior member of a street gang in Southern California who orchestrated in 2 years a series of smash and grab robberies that netted value of $6 million. So these were jewelry grab and runs. And so that gang was able to get $6 million in revenue over 2 years. It's just crazy. And there's another example in the crime report that talks about an enforcement official that referenced an investigation that revealed a particular drug gang. So this gang, which sold drugs and narcotics, actually earned more money from organized retail crime than the sale of illegal narcotics.
Oh my God. It's really hard to get your head around this. So, and Shelley, we should also be clear about the point that ORC is clearly different than shoplifting, which is taking something from retail for personal use and not paying for it. But the difference with ORC is it is large scale and resold to others for financial gain, and also helps fund other illegal activities.
Exactly.
So Shelley, CEOs like Doug McMillan, Walmart, Brian Cornell at Target, Dave Kimball, Ulta, they're all talking about ORC in the Q1 earnings call. So there is certainly a rise in this illegal activity. According to the NRF 2022 National Retail Security Survey, organized retail crime incidents rose 26.5% in 2021. And, it was Walmart's CEO McMillan who warned us last December 2022 that rising theft could lead to store closures and price hikes, which is major negative. If all of this ORC mess is not enough, there's also a rise in violence and aggression with these crimes.
Right.
And particularly post-pandemic, with many retailers being largely concerned, with the safety and well-being of their employees and customers.
It's so true. And it's interesting, Robin, when you talk about some of the retail workers that are literally on the front lines. So while companies will tell associates not to approach an act of organized retail crime while it's happening, which, by the way, is the right thing to do, meaning do nothing, right? Many retail workers also criticize the company for doing nothing about ORC. So here's the quote from real retail workers where they're saying, we know who the thieves are because they come in every week, they steal large quantities of product, but we're not allowed to approach them. So they're just getting away with it. So you and I know, Robin, that the company is protecting the workers, of course, and that's the right thing to do, but something has to be done to kind of change that worker perception too. And by the way, these thieves that go in and do these grab runs, they actually know that workers are being told not to approach them. And they post this on social media and it becomes a best practice on how to steal. It's really sad. It's sad. So whether you're a shopper or an employee, if you end up being a part of an organized retail crime incident, it can be very jarring and it completely impacts the shopping environment. People don't feel safe. And of course, in addition to the safety issues, which is foremost the greatest concern, of course, stolen goods in high quantity impacts the gross margins, as you alluded to. It hits the cost of goods, and the goods are not available for shoppers to actually buy. And to further exacerbate the issue, because the goods are stolen, the system shows them in stock, so they're not replenished until the physical inventory corrected. Boy. And one last point about employee theft. So employee theft used to sit around 50% of total inventory loss. Well, that number's gone down to about 29%. And guess what? External theft is way up at close to 40%. That's inclusive of organized retail crime.
Yeah. Shelley, as ORC climbs and actually seems to be accelerating, the expense to protect the merchandise becomes more costly, whether it is investments in physical measures like, tagging goods, lanyards, technology like RFID, locking cases, etc., or investments in security guards, for example, all leading to the potential for retail prices to rise to cover these added costs. A conundrum.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. And you had mentioned Dave Kimball earlier. He's obviously the CEO of Ulta Beauty, but he said in his earnings call, which just happened recently, that they already started locking up fragrances, which is a highly demanded theft item. And the company is adding more security in stores, and they're adding more workers to stores. So, Ulta Beauty just landed a amazing Q1 performance with sales up 12.3%, which is amazing. Certainly no slipping of consumer demand at Ulta Beauty.
Yeah.
But the margins are being hit and they're down. And it was mentioned that part of the reason that the margins are down is because of organized retail crime. So it's literally taking a bite out of profits. So Kimball says he plans to be personally involved in strategies to reduce the impact of organized retail crime. And, it seems to me that retail CEOs are turning from managing inventory over the past few years and SKU optimization, and now they're really focused on organized retail crime.
It's really a shame when you've got CEOs like David Kimball, Brian Cornell, Doug McMillan, a whole bunch of them are really, adapting to the new world, and they're doing it rapidly. And for them, to have to spend enormous amount of time on this problem is just incredible to me. So, and forget profits and margins. I can't believe I just said that, by the way. Retailers are packing up and leaving towns because theft is such a big problem. Look what is happening in San Francisco. Companies leave communities and take along with it tax revenues, jobs, and being part of a community. Shoppers have to order online to get goods, which negatively impacts the environment. It is a real ripple effect, Shelley, on the community where retails operate.
Here's what Brian Cornell said on the earnings call they recently had. He said, as we look ahead, we now expect shrink will reduce this year's profitability by more than $500 million. This is compared, obviously, to last year. And while there are many potential sources of inventory shrink, theft and organized retail crime are increasingly important drivers of the issue. And then he went on to talk about some of the investments they're making into preventing these types of crimes. And he also said, quote, "We are also focused on managing the financial impact on our business so we can continue to keep our stores open, knowing that they create local jobs and offer convenient access of products to essentials for customers." So Target did have an increase in gross margin in Q1 at 26.3% versus 25.7%. But they had some positive factors like lower cost of goods, higher prices. But he also said that organized retail crime negatively offset some of those favorable margin points.
Based on the recent study by the NRF and K2 Integrity, the ORC groups are getting more sophisticated, which is keeping retailers and law enforcement, on their toes, using technology, AI, chatbots, and on and on and on.
Well, social media certainly boosted, organized retail crime participants' ability to survey best practices, show videos on how to, thwart the anti-theft devices. They're using Facebook, Craigslist,
Unbelievable.
TikTok, all to either fence stolen goods or to teach people how to steal. And, the other major issue in terms of organized retail crime is that there's not this national database of information on ORC. Most law enforcement authorities don't even categorize or track ORC as a specific category of crime. So this kind of lack of information and data collection across retailers is problematic in terms of devising solutions to ORC. Retail communities are really acting in collaboration, but they don't have enough aggregation and collection of data.
Yeah. They're building, this is like building a university to spew out MBAs, for crime. I mean, it's crazy. So Shelley, I agree. Typically retailers are very competitive and don't share secret sauce, but there is a richly developed asset protection community and advanced procedures for stopping ORC. I mean, Saks and Bloomingdale's, Bergdorf Goodman, Nordstrom, Cartier are all working side by side to combat the problem, but they need help with law enforcement and the communities.
Yeah, definitely. And I do agree, Rob. And I do think the asset protection community is very tight, and they do actually work together. And some other solutions might be, further legislation, like there's a new act called the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, which would actually help provide retailers with that national database of information. So they would consolidate the data, making it a powerful tool in the prevention of organized retail crime.
Yeah.
And there's also a lot of technological efforts that can aid in the reduction of organized retail crime, whether it's facial recognition, artificial intelligence, data collection and aggregation, RFID, serialized inventory, so being able to track specifically where specific products are going. You can do full product scanning at POS. And also, even when we talk about RFID, maybe organized retail crime will be, prevention of that will help other retailers actually roll more RFID out. Maybe there'll be a cost save there that actually benefits the retailers. There's also license tag recognition, which, you when you do Easy Pass and all that, you can clearly read, license tag. And a lot of the retailers have advanced weapon detection. So there's tons of technology out there to support stopping organized retail crime efforts. And, the asset protection community is strong. They work together, and they will help reduce the barrier for all retailers. You can also use cameras. So now a lot of the traffic counting cameras used watermark video footage then can help retailers when they go to court. So a watermarked video stands up in court, but retailers really have to have the courage and culture to prosecute. That's a big key point here. There's also collaborations with law enforcement, trainings on safety, apprehension, prosecution, training with store employees on de-escalation efforts and anti-theft techniques also would be helpful. And one last thought on potential solutions for retailers is that for retailers to have their own organized retail crime teams within the retailer that specifically only work on ORC cases. So according to the National Security Survey, only 32% of retailers actually have a dedicated team that works on ORC.
Boy, a lot of work needs to be done. And Shelley, we often pull back to a 50,000-foot view of the macro situation, right? And so what we have to ask is, how much does technology not only make ORC possible, but in fact, because of its incredible ability to integrate gazillions of tons of data, for solutions of enormous scale and creation of entirely new concepts. So, I said something about this earlier. So you look at the global narcotics industry, one may ask a seemingly ridiculous question: one of the major drug cartels going to go public? Think about that, huh? I obviously exaggerate to make my point. So the question: are we seeing the rise of a new industry? Currently, Shelley, that may be a big stretch, but stuff like generative AI and the genius minds that created it are now asking for regulations because of its existential threat to the human race. Nothing is surprising anymore, Shelley. And, and on that happy note, let's wrap it up.
Well, certainly, Robin. For our listeners, you can find more of our podcast on Apple, Spotify, Buzzsprout, and of course, therobinreport.com. Look for us on YouTube, where we broadcast our podcast as well. And please follow us on social media. Link in with us for the latest thoughts about the industry.
And I want to thank everybody once again for joining us. I think you've learned a lot, Shelley, and I sure have. And one last point, which I always make, is that if you guys have any topics that you're thinking about that you would like Shelley and I to cover, just shoot me an email, robin@therobinreport.com. And thanks once again for joining us.